Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Hello, I'm Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber, and today's podcast host. As our state focuses on growing our population and enhancing our homegrown manufacturing, agriculture, and supply chain, permitting issues are front and center, and they're always a big impact on decisions getting made across the business sector here in Michigan. We're going to take a little deeper dive into that today with three great guests. We have Troy Cumings. He's a partner at Warner, Norcorss, and Judd. He's also the chair of the Michigan Chamber's Environmental and Energy Policy Committee. We have Ben Tirrell, the Legislative Counsel for the Michigan Farm Bureau, and our very own Mike Alaimo. He's the Director of Environmental and Energy Affairs at the Michigan Chamber. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, permitting, I think we can agree pretty much impacts everybody in the state, every industry, just across sectors everywhere. But I think we need to kind of get a little bit of a level set and break down exactly what we're kind of seeing now. We have a short time frame today, but I want to cover a few different topics. So if we start with you, Ben, can you just kind of tell us what you're seeing and how permitting's impacting your members?
Sure. Thanks, Jim. From our perspective, it's a pretty diverse array of permitting that we see in the ag and food industry. I think it's a common perception that there are a number of exemptions for agriculture and forestry. While that is true in some cases, larger farms do require permitting, and increasingly diversified smaller farms are also going to require a vast array of permits for non-traditional activities, things like food processing, for example, value-added enterprises, things of that nature. So, there are numerous examples of why that's true. For example, some farms must now conduct washing and sanitizing of certain fruits and vegetables to adhere to federal food safety standards. And then that obviously requires environmental permitting at the state level. So, in addition, I just think it's very important to highlight that we also touch base with a lot of critical upstream and downstream processing and supplier permitting. So that's really important to our industry. And those folks face some very significant regulatory challenges currently, especially related to environmental permits. So in some instances, this is simply causing these key partners to put down roots in neighboring states, and it increases the cost competitiveness of Michigan commodities.
As the Michigan farming community, are you getting permits across a lot of different departments? Are you mostly within one area, one sector of government?
Yeah, there's definitely a number of permits that folks are going to need. Environmental is a big one, especially when you talk about things like wastewater and certainly environmental permits for livestock operations. But there are certain labor-related permits that the farms also have to obtain, things from LEO. So it's really a broad array of permits based on the farm nuances.
Okay. Troy, you're one of the leading experts of permitting in the state, and a lot of the people you work with and represent. What are the ones that you're dealing with most often, and what type of industries are being impacted?
Yeah, as attorneys, we're hired by clients to help with the permitting process, but unfortunately, if you're calling a lawyer, there's usually a reason why. So we, we're getting involved, when there's issues, and that's been for decades, that I've been working in this space. There's always permitting issues, but on the ground right now, I think a top one that we're seeing is environmental, right? And that's always a top issue. A lot of the really big projects that occur, big developments, redevelopments, the environmental permitting is huge. But we see it in every department has permits, literally every type of activity, commercial activity, anything has permits. And so there's issues in different departments, but environmental, I would say on the ground from our perspective, that's probably the biggest issue that we're seeing.
Now, when you talk about environmental, it's kind of a broad category. Is that air, water, cleanup standards? What would somebody think of normally that would be a traditional permit in the environmental community? Yeah,
so a lot of I would say a lot of water, right? But even when we say permitting, a lot of it is if you're going to redevelop a site, for example, or clean up a site, they're not necessarily called permits, right? But you're gonna have a work plan. You have to get that approved. Mm-hmm. That's all kind of permitting, right? Yeah. And so cleanup, water, air, waste. Yeah. Right, those kind of four areas, which are the four areas of environmental law. Sometimes it goes really well, but there are definitely some issues that we see.
Ben, we were joking a little bit with Troy about when you need an attorney, that sometimes it's not going the best. Can most of your members do the permitting on their own, or are they do they need to go out and hire a consultant or an attorney to walk them through a process?
Yeah, from our members' perspective, that really is a function of the size of the entity. So some of our larger farms certainly hire consultants and lawyers and things of that nature to do permitting for them. That's the reality. These permits are just increasingly complex, and folks just aren't able to handle all that red tape on their own. For smaller entities, it's simply not an economic reality, right? They have to try and wade through that on their own. There just isn't money in the budget for that separate function, so they have to try and do the best they can.
Yeah, Mike, when you talk to a lot of our members and people across the general business community, how are they viewing permitting? We talk about that everybody's going to need one at some point. And I don't know anybody who doesn't want to do things the right way. I don't know any business owner who doesn't want clean water and clean air and really follow the rules. It just seems like sometimes the hurdles are either too high or the goalposts are constantly moving. I'm going to have a lot of sports metaphors here. Yeah. That it's just hard to comply, regardless of whether you have professional consultant help or not.
Yeah, no, 100% true. I think, we're as Troy pointed out, whether you're talking about a formal permit under law or the permissive nature of the department approving any said environmental plan or construction plan, et cetera, it really is the linchpin of development and investment in the state. One of the best tangible examples, I think, of Jim, something that you and I both work on, is the aggregates issue, and the strong need for aggregates for every sort of project throughout the state, whether you're fixing our roads and bridges, building new construction projects, or a very important bridge in southeast Michigan. We need aggregate material in order to do that. With the legislature just passed significant reforms to the permitting and siting of renewable energy projects. And one of the things that was immediately pointed out was, hey, you're going to need a ton of sand and gravel in order to build those new wind turbines or set the the platforms and the make-ready development for solar arrays. So, there are just a number of key industries that are critical in getting to where we need to go with our state's laudable goals around bringing manufacturing jobs back and growing our population, et cetera. But we need a business-friendly regulatory system in order to do so.
When you talk about a regulatory system for our listeners, do all permits have to come through a legislative process? Do departments promulgate their own and they get to write the rules? And how does the input happen from people who are actually having to fill out those permits?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Troy has thoughts on this as well. It's a process that's written through statute, but departments have fairly broad ability to write rules where statute allows around that process. But the legislature has also put into place kind of some checks and balances around that process, and so we're now seeing this legislature take a look at removing some of these bodies that were put into place to make sure that the business community and other stakeholders were able to work with the department, flag issues where rulemaking or permitting had maybe gone sideways or went awry. And removing those agencies, it makes the whole process more difficult and less transparent. And so we have concerns about kind of the general direction of that.
Yeah. We saw, over the last couple of years, spent a lot of federal money coming down to the states in many different areas. What's that doing? If there's more money in, there's more money available to do projects. And so, I would assume we need more permits because you're trying to do things. Troy, we'll start with you. What's been the impact of all that tremendous influx of money?
Yeah, I think what we saw with a lot of the COVID money is what you said. The money's pumped into the economy, right? And a lot of them were given away for grants, and then those grants are used to immediately do new projects, right? So, yeah, the permitting issues get amplified, right? If there were issues before, now there's a lot more projects going on, right, in the state. So, at least from our standpoint, more activity, you see more of the permitting issues.
Yeah. I'd be interested from all three of your perspectives, especially Ben, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Troy after. How do we compare against other states? When people look at us, obviously people are saying, I want to live, work, play here in Michigan, I want to grow a business. Do they look at us as being a leader, or are we falling behind and have more problems than some other states?
Yeah, I think just as Mike just mentioned, that business climate is going to be really key to directing people here. And so as Troy just mentioned, I agree completely with that statement that, we have a lot of this federal money coming in right now. And I think that's going to be really interesting to watch because, that's these permitting processes are really an impediment. And so a great example that I think I can offer for our organization's perspective is community digesters or anaerobic digesters. So anaerobic digesters just being facilities that recycle organic wastes, and they turn those in, they capture greenhouse gas, and they turn those into energy in the form of biogas. And so, I think, as we've alluded to, companies are lining up to build these things. There's a great market for these things based on the renewable energy market. And they're a win-win for rural communities. However, we currently have this convoluted permitting framework that just doesn't allow that to happen. So we're losing those investments to other states. Those companies are openly communicating with us that they're moving on. And so, I think it's a shame because it's a win-win for both businesses and rural communities and the environmental community, frankly. And so we just need to find a way to clear out some of these roadblocks. And I think that makes Michigan more competitive. It allows us to reach for some of those goals that Mike just mentioned in terms of population growth and economic growth.
Is the problem we're having, is it a philosophical difference? Is it, hey, it's just timing, we haven't got to it yet? How come we're having that hurdle with those digesters?
I think it's a complex issue, and really the issue is just one of maybe communication, right? I think it's something that sort of fell in between the cracks of one of those four parts of environmental rules, permitting. And so for that reason, nobody can decide whose responsibility is. And so the solution is just that, a digester should go get all of these permits, every permit that's potentially applicable. And so that just isn't competitive. It just doesn't allow these to operate, economically, and we lose all the benefits that we might accrue.
Yeah. Troy, how do you see it? How are we stacking up against other states and permitting, and the clients that you have? Are they saying, hey, great to do business in Michigan, it's awesome, or hey, are we losing some because Michigan's stubbing our toe?
Yeah, I would say it's not great right now. I think an example would be just a recent, I think a couple days ago, Detroit Crane's Business came out with an article about the Stellantis EV plant and kind of going to Kokomo, Indiana. And one of the major reasons was our regulatory climate and even taking millions and millions of dollars less to go, right? Well, that just shows how important the regulatory climate are. There were more issues there for sure, but it was cited as a reason. So that's not great, right? Even the perception of that among site selectors are that Michigan isn't as good, right, as like an Indiana. And I think you see that the Whitmer administration is doing something, right? So it's an issue. They're listening because the governor just signed an executive order in August around permitting, and that's in process right now. There's going to be more happening from now until the end of the year to really get back. It's more focused on wait times. I think there are some other issues that they should be dealing with, but that's more focused on the timing and getting permit fees back if they don't meet deadlines. It's a good start for sure, but I think you're seeing that even from the Whitmer administration acknowledging that this is an issue, right? If nothing else, perception, it's not good right now.
Mike, when you talk to legislators and policymakers, do they understand the concern the business community has with the permitting process?
I think there's a broader understanding that this is a challenge. I think that it to Ben's point, continues to be critical that we are communicating effectively with policymakers about what issues the regulated community is running into. Is there a lack of accessibility with regulators and the folks that are ultimately reviewing applications? Is it an issue of there's a miscommunication or a difference of opinion and perspective, as we have seen with projects in the past? I think legislators care, but I think it's on us to help inform them on how to act, and so we're certainly working to do that. I think on the other side, one of the other aspects of it is COVID affected state government like it affected many employers, and we saw a lot of turnover within agency staff, and so we have folks that are coming in and. Because they don't have the historic experience and wherewithal, to exercise maybe the statutory flexibility that they have, they just don't, right? And so, in order to kind of avoid being having a target on your back or being put in the hot seat, they just kind of follow the letter of the law and are quick. Their default is to say no, and that's a challenge.
Troy, how much interpretation is there when you deal with permits? I know one of the things I've heard from our members before is you follow everything you read, or everything that's stated in the permit. And depending where you are in the state, you may just get a different regulator from the same department, and you get a different answer. And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations is consistency. Is there a lot that's left up to the judgment of the regulator, or is it really pretty strict in what's spelled out?
Yeah, I think obviously it depends on the permit, but yeah, for the complex permits, there is just a lot of subjectivity, right? And it is true that different areas of the state might do it differently. Different divisions might look, at a particular statutory section differently. Even like the water section might look at it different than the waste division, for example, right? So there's a lot of issues, and that's where you get blurred. You get a lot of times, and where a lot of problems come up with the permitting process is when part of a permit is actually regulatory, right? And so you're looking at what does this rule mean and stuff to write that into the permit, and then there's a disagreement, and that's why we really supported the permit review panel, because some of those things that happen early on, you can kind of have a process to resolve it and still not. You wouldn't get denied the permit ultimately. Now, if you have a disagreement, it forces the department to say no to the permit, and then you got to start all over, right? So it's not great. That's one of the reasons why we really liked that process. But yeah, we see that a lot on interpretation and a lot of the complex permits. It's an issue.
Ben, and the regulators you and your members deal with, do we have the staffing resources they need? A lot of times I'll hear from regulators, we just need more resources. We're slow for time frames, so I know that's one of the things we've always looked at is what, you may not have a shot clock, but what's the right amount of time that you should be able to get a permit? Do we have the resources? I know there's been a lot of efforts to bolster that, and money's expended.
That's a great question. So I would agree with that there have been a lot of complaints historically about timeframes and wait periods related to permits. I think we've seen that on a number of different fronts. I don't think it's unique to one division or anything or even agency, frankly. And so, but yeah, I've definitely seen some additional resources devoted to those agencies. I think maybe it's a little too soon to tell, as Troy alluded to. I think, with the pandemic and with turnover and things that Mike alluded to through COVID, I think we've seen some departures, and I don't know that all those positions have been filled yet. So it'll be interesting to see whether we do see improvement in that service over time.
Have we brought back the regulators to Lansing? Are people back here where you can get in touch with them?
Not fully. A lot are still remote. Like when you jump on Zooms, a lot of times they're in their house still, right? That happens a lot. Some are back, but not fully. But I guess I'll just talk a little bit about that staffing issue, because it's always an issue, right? For decades, this has been an issue about departments say they need more staff, and I would say it depends, right? And in some instances, we would agree more staff is needed, especially in those if it's just objectively doing things to get things done faster. 100%. We would be supportive of that, right? The problem is a lot of times you'll get in those situations where, we want more staff, and maybe it's because of departures, right? It's not anybody's fault. A lot of retirements that happened right after COVID, right? And you get a bunch of people in that don't have the experience. So getting more people in, that's not going to be a good thing because they're inexperienced, right? So it'll slow things down, right? But also it's sometimes, from at least the regulated community standpoint, if there's additional staff that come in, a lot of times there's a feeling of, there's just more people to make things more complex, right? Yeah. It's just more people that will come up with reasons to say no to a permit. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the case, but there's definitely a feeling.
A perception of it.
There's the perception. And so that's always the push and pull there about when there's a legislative ask for more staff.
Mike, as we think about permitting and things that impact the timeliness, how much impact does a situation like the Flint water crisis have? Obviously, there was a problem the state had to deal with and work through, but does the outcome of that situation impact how willing people are to move on permits now, or how they look at permits in certain areas?
I think the answer has to be yes. And I think there are a variety of opinions on this, but certainly what we saw post Flint water crisis was the idea that if you're not careful, and something happens, whether it was within your scope of authority or not, you could be held liable. And have seen some specific circumstances where we have had individual companies, company members come to us with challenges that they're having with any one permit. Had one recently with a blueberry farmer was dealing with some cleaning agents. And all of a sudden, after 12 years of being approved for this list of cleaning agents that they could use, they were denied. And the response, of course, was, well, what can I use? And essentially they were told, well, we can't tell you because we don't want to be held liable. And that's obviously a serious catch-22 scenario for that blueberry farmer to find themselves in, right? What am I supposed to do? Now they're in the process of working with environmental engineers to kind of look at the vast array of chemicals that you can use and try to mix and match in a way that makes sense and kind of fits the parameters of what they're being told, but they're not really being told with specificity what will work. And so for businesses, that level of uncertainty and certainly the testing that goes along with it, it's very expensive.
Yeah, that seems like it would cause a lot of frustration too. You're trying to do it the right way. The department says, not this. Well, just tell us what. Again, back to my don't move the goalpost. Just tell. I don't know. I've never had a member or any business owner I know that says, I don't want to follow the rules. It's always like, just tell me what the rules are. I need predictability. I'll follow the rules and we'll do it the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I can speak mainly for our members, but certainly every single one of the, Michigan Chamber members that I work with every day want to do the right thing. They want to protect our environment. They want to be good stewards of their community. And just having regulatory certainty, it's what we've kind of seen here with this discussion is, you can throw money at a problem, you can throw more resources at a problem, but it takes no money or resources or taxpayer dollars at all to just provide regulatory certainty, provide a better, more flexible framework. It's really just taking a different approach.
Yep. We have a few seconds left here. I just want to go around the horn real quickly. Just what's next on the horizon, either something that you think is coming or what you would like to see come. And Ben, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think, that's a big question right now, and it's hard to know in a lot of ways. But I think, similar to, I think what the Chamber's watching, we're watching those EGLE oversight bills pretty closely. And, frankly, a lot of these, things that aren't in bills now too, a lot of these permitting or de facto permitting pieces are really important for our members now. I think we have some opportunities to do some meaningful and productive things in the coming year with some of these issues, but whether we can get to that remains to be seen.
Troy?
Yeah, I would say just really being vigilant at legislation, right, in 2024. Like what else is going to happen, right? And we don't want things to happen that is going to further complicate the permitting process. But I guess I would hope, right, that going forward, we just have more of a discussion, right, between the regulated community, environmental community, and the department, right, on how do we actually make improvements to this, right? Because there are some things out there that are real stumbling points, but they're difficult issues. That's why they've been what I call 20-year issues, right? They're difficult to resolve, but we can resolve them through talking, give and take, right? But it has to be a real discussion. I'm hopeful. And maybe this governor's EO will start that process.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Whether it's permitting or any of the topics that we all deal with on a daily basis or impact our life, it's about practical problem solving. What's the problem and how do you get to resolution that benefits everyone and creates a stronger Michigan for all? Mike, we'll give you the last word.
No, I think it was well said by Ben and Troy. Hopeful and optimistic around the governor's efforts to improve and streamline the permitting process. We want to work with her on that where and when possible. Certainly there's some legislation coming down the pike that we're concerned about. We did a segment recently on, some of the, concerning laws that we're seeing coming up potentially in 2024. One of those being potentially cumulative impacts legislation and, kind of taking a multi-factor approach when viewing a environmental permit. I think where and when we can get on the same page in terms of solving goals and trying to solve problems, we want to be there for it. But we don't want to just create a more prohibitive regulatory environment. So we're going to be watching very closely what the legislature has for us in the next year.
Great, thanks. Well, with that, we are out of time. A very special thanks to Troy, Ben, and Mike, and to all of you for listening. I think we all know that predictability, timeliness, transparency, they're all keys to effective and fair permitting process that's going to benefit all of us in our great state. Make sure to keep listening, tune in, subscribe, and like our podcast for easy notifications. But until next time, do whatever you can to keep moving Michigan forward.